This is Partners in Crime with Adam Croft and...
Not the other one. Hello, happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of Partners in Crime, and another one where Mr. Dawes isn't here. He's taken some time off from the podcast to do an actual proper job, and he's currently on tour. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I'm joined again by the incomparable Mr. Adrian Hobart. Hello, Adrian.
Hi, thanks again for having me.
Well, no, thank you for stepping into the breach once more. It's been a busy old week, actually, for me, certainly, because I've had a new book out this week on Tuesday, Absolution, which came out on the 5th of November. So, I was going to have a little chat about that first, actually, and do some dreadful self-promotion.
Oh, why not? Yeah, I mean, it's been part of my week too, because I'm working on the audiobook at the moment. So,
that's right.
Yeah, why not? Blow your own trumpet on this.
Well, how are you finding the audiobook? We'll ask you about that, because that way you can provide a bit of insight into the first Sam Barker book without it sounding too promotional from my point of view.
Good, yeah. Well, look, I mean, it's a fabulous read, and it's a departure for you, clearly, in terms of content. But what I love about all your work is it's very grounded. So, these are not characters that come from a comic book. These are characters that you could meet anywhere in the context in which you set them. So, we're in Westminster. We've got, Sam, who is the main protagonist, Sam Barker, who is, just a fairly ordinary IT guy, albeit that he's brilliant at his job. And he's in the Home Office and gets sucked into an extraordinary web of shadow organisations and deep plots to blow up the Queen. Dare I say it? So we got that bit.
Well, that's fine. It's an extraordinary story, actually. Not the book itself, which of course is an extraordinary story, of course. But it's just in general everything behind it. It's been a bizarre journey. I mean, the book was co-written with a guy called Stephen Moore. We've written pretty much half each, actually, as it's turned out. Yeah. And we had to keep rewriting it a few times because real life events just kept overtaking us. I mean, we were quite keen that this was to be a thriller. It's got a kind of political background, but really it's a psychological thriller, I think, in many ways. So we tried to make it not a political commentary or a satire or anything like that, but it kept straying into that, not through any fault of our own, but because real life events kept overtaking us, and we kept putting things into the book that then we would switch the news on a week or two later and find out it had actually happened. And we didn't want to get into the realms of people thinking, oh, that's this person, or that's Boris Johnson, or this is whatever, because it kept actually happening. So the ending isn't the ending we had planned. There's lots of bits that have changed which weren't intended to be there, and as a result it's actually taken us months to get the book done and perfected and out there. Best part of a year, nearly. It was a bizarre thing, and even weirder than that, I was invited last week to an evening drinks reception in Westminster, in the Houses of Parliament, completely unconnected to this book. It just so happened to be a bit of a coincidence, hosted by the Speaker of the House, John Bercow, which was extraordinary timing. It was 6 days before Absolution came out, set in the heart of Westminster, in the Houses of Parliament, somewhere I'd never been to before, never expected in my life to get invited to. And I found myself doing Sam's journey, and doing the journey which is described in chapter 1 of the book, where the bomber takes a train journey along the Circle and District line from sort of Blackfriars direction down towards Westminster, where the bomb goes off at the beginning of the book, and Westminster Station is blown up. And I found myself coming above ground in Westminster Station thinking, Christ, I've blown this place up in a book just kind of weeks ago. And it was just the oddest thing. And I remember kind of looking around me and behind me and thinking, somebody's got to be, got to have a special branch after me somewhere. The timing of this, it's just too it's too
spooky.
Too spooky. They've got to think I'm doing something about this, and that life is imitating art. Or it was just a very odd thing, and lots of things like that have come together that have made this book. I mean, even though it is the first book that I set in a real location and have sort of grounded in real everyday life in that sense, it's become even more real in lots of ways, and it's very, very bizarre experience, lots of fun. Glad the book is out there now. We can share Sam Barker with the world, and we're already working away on book 2 and book 3 as well, which will be out in the not too distant future.
I think it's going to be a fantastic success, and creating, again, it's another set of characters I had to create. So you described one of the key characters, Travers, as being very similar to Guy Henry, who for UK audiences might know him from Holby City, where he plays Henrik Hansen, the stentorious. And
that's kind of how I saw him, in my head,
And so I've tried to create that sort of sound, clipped. It reminded me of my old German teacher, who was emotionally repressed. This particular teacher of mine had a nervous breakdown and had rebuilt himself as this sort of almost Terminator of teachers. Totally unemotional. Everything was rationalized. Everything was clipped. And if you stepped out of line, he had this horrible habit of asking you what punishment you deserved. Wow. And if you underestimated, he gave you double. So you were in this sort of sense of jeopardy. And if you overestimated it, of course, he would give you that anyway. Yeah. So and that's how I felt he would speak and behave. And I loved creating, and embodying him. It took me back a bit. I never really want to cross this German teacher's path again, but
well, no,
it certainly etched on my soul. So I think I sort of channeled him, I think is the phrase, isn't it?
Yes, he's definitely a very interesting character, Travers. Very much enjoyed writing him. I think we've got lots more to come from him. He's but don't want to go too far into who he is or what his role is in the book, but another great reason, I think, to get hold of a copy of Absolution this week, which, why not? Let me make it my recommendation of the week, shall we? Actually, I'll tell you what, we'll make it your recommendation of the week. It sounds a little less haughty then, doesn't it?
Maybe.
If you want to get hold of a copy of Absolution by myself, Adam Croft, and Stephen Moore, highly recommend you do so from Kobo, who very kindly sponsor this podcast. Head over to kobo.com. Find a copy of Absolution, and if it's your first purchase from Kobo, you can enter the promo code CRIME at the checkout to get 90% off. And if it's not your first purchase, if it's not your first rodeo, if you're an existing Kobo customer, enter the promo code PARTNERS and you get 40% off of that book and selected other books, including all of mine, for life from those lovely people at Kobo. Right, I was going to move on to an article that kind of reminded me of while we were talking about, link between kind of politics and crime. I saw an article in Frieze magazine this week, contemporary art magazine, which of course I read from cover to cover every week. With the title, Has Boris Johnson Been Watching True Crime Netflix? Clickbaity title, nothing at all to do with what the article's actually about, but it opens with the words, Brexit is a crime scene, whistleblower Christopher Wiley remarked in 2018. Now, before any of you switch off, don't worry, we're not talking about Brexit, we are talking about crime fiction here, but the article goes on talking about how Brexit, modern day politics in general, is kind of it resembles the patterns that we see in crime fiction, and maybe this is why so many people have become so polarised, have become so keen to watch it. We've got BBC Parliament is getting record viewing figures. It's the fastest growing BBC station, I think, at the moment, one of the fastest growing at all, and the article dives into why that is. It says here, a crime scene, unreliable witnesses, conspiracy theories, accusations back and forth, an absorbed audience struggling to piece together the facts. Brexit takes place as a detective series. And it goes on to point out that politics has always been about story. It says politics has always relied on narrative. It's the party or person with the most persuasive story that wins. Once upon a time, these stories were long and complex. Today, they tend to resemble an angry soundbite or an inarticulate tweet, which I thought was quite interesting, actually. And the links that politics in general is about creating a story, creating a narrative, building that drama. I thought was pretty intriguing. I thought it was quite timely as well with the release of that book this week.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the thing is that, it's become declamatory now, hasn't it? I mean, all public discourse is just, as you say, it's short sound bites. It's taking a defined position and sticking to it, regardless of fact or, to some extent, credibility or honour. Honour seems to have disappeared out of it. I mean, there are elements of it, but when you watch the Parliament, there are those that cling to it and refer back. But even the ones that were using parliamentary precedent in the past, like Jacob Rees-Mogg is always talking about, this is in that way he does, talking about, this is the honourable way to behave, and this is the way that we've always done this parliamentary procedure. And of course, when it's expedient, that's all dropped and ripped apart. So it is a really weird thing where actually you watch the Parliament channel, and you're just trying to judge who is speaking with any sincerity in this debate. It seems to people switch sides every 5 seconons. It's quite extraordinary.
Definitely a story. Definitely some high entertainment in there anyway. We spoke, I can't remember if it was last week's episode, we mentioned, or fairly recently anyway, the reasons why I write crime fiction, and the fact that somebody came up to me at a crime festival, book festival, I think last year, and was surprised that I actually seemed like quite a nice person, despite the horrible things that I wrote
Yes.
about. Was that last week? Probably was, wasn't it?
It was last week, yes, and you said that it was driven by a fear of death, in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is why when I saw in The Guardian this week an article by Gary Disher, who is an Australian rural crime author. Wonder if he's from Melbourne, actually, seems we go back to last week's topics. With the headline on the article is, "Being a crime writer doesn't mean I condone murder. Do I even have to say it?" And the subtitle, "Every now and then I encounter people who can't suspend disbelief. They ask how I can write about such terrible things." I found this really, really interesting, actually. It's an extraordinary article, actually, which really resonated with me. I mean, Gary Disher says that his books are extremely popular in Germany, which doesn't actually resonate with me. They don't sell all that well in Germany. But he said he went over there to do a book signing and an event, and he said a woman in Bern was having none of it. She wouldn't leave until I said that, of course, I didn't approve of murder and mayhem. This reminded me actually of that encounter I had in Milton Keynes, which of course is far more exotic than Bern. And he goes on to say, "Should I have to account for myself? Do I have obligations beyond entertaining readers, giving them their money's worth? I genuinely don't know, but every now and then I encounter people for whom a story is not just a story, who cannot suspend disbelief. They'll ask, how can you write about such terrible things? If I say it's just a story, they're not satisfied." Now that led me on to think about a number of emails that I've had over the years. I mean, I get emails all the time, and I think this is probably something you've got to get to look forward to, Adrian, actually, when you release your book, is getting all sorts of very interesting emails from all sorts of very interesting people. And I do genuinely get them all the time from people who email me to tell me that I'm the reason for all the ill in the world, and that, writing about people being murdered is what makes people go out and murder people, which is interesting considering, number of people the Romans were killing, for example, before the written word was even invented. But yeah, you do get some very odd messages from some very odd people who don't realise that books are books, stories are stories, and that fiction doesn't influence real life in that way. Of course, the example.
Well, is it a sense of, a flip side of being a very good author, in the sense that you've transported whoever's read your book so the realism and the detail and the layering of nuance and whatever has become so convincing that they've been carried one step further than you imagine. I mean, that's what we're after, is when we're writing, we don't want them sitting there going, well, that's factually incorrect, or that doesn't seem real, or that person's behaving in a way that I couldn't possibly imagine anyone behaving. That's what we're trying to avoid. And perhaps, people take it an extra 10%, further into reality and start to believe it.
Well, yeah, maybe so. I mean, that's certainly a very positive way of looking at it. I shall certainly go in with that approach in the future and assume that's why people are saying those things. But yeah, I think it depends as well. There are quite often the emails do tend to come, dare I say it, from the Deep South in America, where I think perhaps religious attitudes can have a certain element of play there. I don't know. It's odd. I mean, again, this is a job where you're dealing with the general public on a large scale. You're open to people from every walk of life in every angle of the world, and of course there are going to be some interesting personalities and some interesting people. But I just found it quite interesting actually that Gary, right on the other side of the world, as an Australian crime writer, seems to experience the same sorts of things. And he goes on to put a very positive spin on the end, which I'm going to end with as well. And this little piece where he says, "There's nothing better than mixing with readers, though. I meet people who no longer confuse me with Gary Crew. My signing queues might even reach the tea urn these days, and I've come to treat everyone's questions with respectful consideration. Even, where do you get your ideas from?" Which is a question you're going to have to get used to answering, Adrian, when you've got books out. Let me tell you that, because that one will come at you every 30
that's
seconds.
Right. I'm going to have to come up with some good answers, because at the moment, it's one of those things I like to, the fact is it just pops in. As soon as I'm in front of the keyboard, that's where they arrive.
Yeah.
And it's Johnny Marr, who I love Johnny Marr from formerly of the Smiths and now touring solo. He always says, inspiration has to find you working, and that's a fact. I think that's one of the strong themes in your non-fiction work about how to be an author. It's around, if you're not in front of the keyboard, it isn't going to happen. Yeah. But although there are those periods, and I'm sure you have these too, where we're out walking. I carry my phone, so I put notes down in that. Some ideas will strike, or I'll think of a new way of deepening the story that I'm working on or something like that. But most of the time, it comes when I'm actually there and I'm sort of trying to imagine the scene, and things just pop up, and that's where the ideas pop in.
I think it was Somerset Maugham who said, I can only write when I'm inspired. Unfortunately, inspiration strikes at 9 o'clock sharp every morning. Which is something I repeat time and time again, but that is the case. And I'm testament to that. I'm going through a definite purple patch in terms of the writing and getting the words out at the moment. I'm hitting 4,000 words plus a day at the moment by being very rigorous and very structured about it. I'm hammering out the new Night in Culverhouse book, the 9th one, which I'm due to finish in the next couple of days, in fact, and should be out this year, which is extraordinary considering I've had one out 3 days ago. I've got the next 2 or 3 books planned and ready to write and hammer out the words on those as well. So I'm very much enjoying that state of flow, and it's absolutely right. It's a lot easier the more you do it. The more you sit down to write, the easier it is to write. I mean, we decided we were going to record this podcast this morning, and I had about 45 minutes to spare before we were due to do so. And I'm just checking my piece of software here. Yeah, I wrote nearly 1,400 words in that time.
That's really impressive.
In those 45 minutes waiting, for the time to roll around to record this. So it's just, and it's a hell of a lot easier once you're, in that frame of mind, when you're writing every day. And I'm doing so 7 days a week now, and every day does become easier as a result of that, and it actually becomes a pleasure to do. It's like if you go to the gym or go for a run once every 6 months, it's going to be hell. But the more you do it, the easier it gets, the more enjoyable and pleasurable it becomes. You don't have to come over overcome those hurdles each time.
No, right, and I'm in a sort of a similar little sort of period, really. You mentioned running. I'm just trying to start that now, so that's every other day. But in terms of the writing, I need to be there in front of the screen every day writing, balanced with audiobook work. It's quite tricky, but it's NaNoWriMo month for those who follow these things. National Novel Writing Month around the world, and I am indulging in that, and I'm targeting 2,000 words a day, which will pick up. In the past, when I've sat down and done it every day, then it probably creeps up towards that 4,000 mark when I'm in flow. But 2,000 is pretty achievable, and it's taking shape, and I'm really pleased with the outcome, because I think one of the benefits of being an audiobook narrator is that you learn an awful lot from the people you're reading and performing for, and that is reflecting in my writing, I think. So it's very early on in my career. I only picked up writing maybe 18 months ago, and it's nothing's published yet, but I think it's chalk and cheese what I was producing before. And I'm really enjoying the process, but I would love to be in that position where I know I've got one out, and it's the same with audiobooks. Whenever they appear on Amazon or whatever, there's such a great thrill to see your name against something.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now, I mentioned earlier on that Bob's not here. He's currently touring, and just because he's not here doesn't mean we're not going to talk about him. So we're going to do a little push for his show that he's currently in, which is Alan Ayckbourn's 10 Times Table. It's the inaugural production of the classic comedy theatre company, produced by Bill Kenwright, and the little bit of blurb about the show goes thusly. In the long-since grand ballroom of the local Swan Hotel, a most miscellaneous assemblage gather to conduct the business of the Pendon Folk Festival, led by excitable Chairman Ray, played by our Bob. Unfortunately for Ray, his calamitous committee quickly divides as his wife Helen has a bone to pick. Add a Marxist schoolteacher, a military dog breeder, and an octogenarian secretary, and the table is set for one of comedy master Ayckbourn's most hilarious plays. A tumultuous comedy by committee, not to be missed. Sounds like a lot of fun. Of course, Bob's in that. Various other people, Gemma Oten, Mark Curry, him off of Blue Peter from back in the day. Some very, very funny pictures are online as well, which I wish I could show you. Alas, we are in audio. If you do want to go and see that, he is in Newcastle until Saturday the 9th, so the day after this goes out, at the Theatre Royal. The 11th to the 16th of this month in Malvern at the Festival Theatre. Then at the Devonshire Park Theatre in Eastbourne from the 18th to the 23rd, and at the Yvonne Arnaud Theatre in Guildford from the 25th to the 30th of November. Then it moves to the Theatre Royal Bath from the 2nd to the 7th of December. Then he gets about a month and a half off until he goes back to the Richmond Theatre, 20th to the 25th of January, Edinburgh King's Theatre from the 3rd to the 8th of Feb, 10th to the 15th of February at the York Grand Opera House, then down to Shrewsbury for the Seventh Theatre between the 17th and 22nd of February. 24th to the 29th of February is at the Everyman Theatre in Cheltenham, one of my favourite theatres. 9th to the 14th of March at Chesterfield at the wonderfully named Pomegranate Theatre. And then ending at the wonderful Theatre Royal in Brighton between the 23rd to the 28th of March. So if you want to get your tickets to 10 Times Table, it's playing all those places, and we will thankfully be hearing very little from Mr. Dawes during those periods. So,
it's an itinerary of my favourite theatres. You were just knocking them off one by one. It's fantastic.
Oh, I know. Festival Theatre in Malvern, gorgeous. He's getting to play at some very beautiful places. He will be having a few shows off between now and next year, so we may hear you stepping into the breach a little bit more, Adrian, in the meantime. But I know he's got some time off around Christmas and a few odd little weekends and bits and bobs where we might be able to squeeze him in.
Fantastic.
We noticed last week, somewhere around there, that the Gold Dagger Awards award was, awarded. The winner this year was M.W. Craven's The Puppet Show. Now, this is something that we talked about in our live episode, wasn't it, in Morecambe?
Yeah, that's right. And I think, I mean, it was described as being so accurate in terms of location that you could almost use it as a guidebook, albeit, in a very twisted context. But and I suggested that Wainwright should be worried, not that he's with us anymore, but certainly the publishers of those fantastic guides to the Fells. So great that we had, a heads up on that, and congratulations. And it's really... I've just sort of taking a look at his career. It strikes me that he's gone to the big time quite quickly from being with a small imprint only a few years ago. So really fantastic to see that people are looking out for new talent, if you like, and I like his sort of backstory about being in the British Army and then moving into this world. It's it's encouraging.
And it is an extraordinary read as well, I've got to say. It's probably my favourite read of the year, Puppet Show by M.W. Craven. It's set in remote rural Cumbria. Some absolutely superb characters. They really are. I can't say any more than that, other than Poe and Tilly are such a brilliant double act, and I've already got the rest of the series as currently is in its fairly young state, but I'm ready and raring to catch up with the rest of the books there. The short list that the Puppet Show beat was All the Hidden Truths by Claire Askew, What We Did by Christabel Kent, Unto Us a Son is Given by Donna Leon, American by Day by Derek B. Miller, and A Station on the Path to Somewhere Better by Benjamin Wood, which is quite a formidable shortlist, actually. I mean, even the long list had some absolute crackers on there. They've got the likes of David Mark, Abby Mukherjee, William Shaw, Peter Swanson, some big names.
Yeah, I read Belinda Bowes' Snap. That was on the list, wasn't it?
Yes, on the... I can't see it on the long list. Oh, yes, it is on the long list. Yes, Belinda Bowes' Snap, yes, managed to scroll straight past that somehow. Even the submissions, likes of Peter May, Eddie Griffiths, Christopher Bookmeyer, Mark Billingham, Val McDermid, all of these, MC Beaton, these have all been kind of knocked into the long grass by and even another M.W. Craven book, Black Summer. Stephen Booth, Robert Brinzer, they're all, the submissions are absolutely extraordinary. The long list was phenomenal. The short list is whatever comes after that. So I think I've peaked there, Adrian.
Yes, absolutely. Well, look, something to aspire to, isn't it?
It is.
A nice dinner at the whatever I think was the what was the hotel? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I do like a good awards ceremony. I've been to a few in my broadcasting life. The best one was in Athens, where they the International Paralympic Committee graced us with an award for our coverage, and that was just an extraordinary event, really. It's so inspirational because you're on stage with all these amazing Paralympians. You feel quite small, really, having won an award for the radio. But but there is this sort of phenomenon. I used to go to the Sony Awards when it was, and indeed they're now called the ARIAs. They're sort of the Oscars of the radio world, and it's one of the most drunken and catty environments you'll ever find. Everyone is seething when they don't get an award because there's no cameras on it. It's not like the BAFTAs where they have to sort of pretend to be happy for someone else. Here, you can hear bottles of wine being slammed down on the table in disgust and people storming out. It's quite extraordinary.
I have heard that the Sonys, as they were, are quite. As you know, I've got quite a few kind of radio chums, and I hear it is an interesting experience and a hell of a night out. And listening to some of the people on air the next day, they can possibly sound a little gruff and worse for wear.
Yeah, if you notice that, after the Sonys, the travel person is the one doing most of the presenting. Yeah, that's a pretty strong indication that things were heavy. And this is a little trick if you ever get to go to something like that. What happened was the regional stations all had to catch their trains, so they didn't stick around for the end, but their half-drunk bottles of wine would be left on the table. And so the BBC London-based staff used to go and sweep them up off these sort of little stations tables and hoard all these bottles of wine, and that's why basically no output went out of any quality the day after.
Excellent. A bit like New Year's Day, just showing the repeats.
Yes, exactly.
Brilliant. Well, I like these little insights into Radio Land. Maybe we'll have some more next week. I'm just having a look down at my my diary here to see if Mr. Dawes is back. I think we might have time to squeeze in a Dawes episode over to weekend, but I'll have to get in touch with him and find out, because his schedule is very hectic at the moment. So it might be him, it might be you next week. I'll we'll leave that little surprise, shall we, until next Friday.
It'll be a mystery to be solved yet.
Yes, the next big mystery to solve. Thank you for joining us again, Adrian, and maybe not see you next week.
Well, I look forward to it whenever.
Partners in Crime was presented by Adam Croft and
Not the other one.
produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Bache. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.